Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It's a pleasure to see all these strangers in my bedroom. I've been here a while, and I don't get to rise up very often. But every now and then, somebody will walk by and stop for a minute, and I get a chance to say my howdy do's. Well, my name is Stewart, John Stewart, and I was laid to rest here a long time ago. Actually, 224 years and 2 weeks ago today, if that gives you some frame of reference. I don't scare people very often. Occasionally somebody walks by on this sidewalk down here and I boo at them. They run, but that's all right. I like the enjoyment of it. I had 9 children, so I'm used to doing things to kids too. Now, let me tell you a little something about myself. I was born in 1798 in Henry County, Virginia, but I don't remember living in Virginia. My family moved here to Kentucky when I was just a little lad, and my father Thomas and my mother settled down in Cumberland County to start with, but Columbia was kind of a boom town in the early 1800s. Lots of business for a town of our size, and some opportunities. So my father moved up here, and in 1812, I was just barely 14 years old. My father apprenticed me out to learn a trade. Now that was a common thing during those days. If you had a boy and you wanted him to learn a good profession, you apprenticed him out. You signed him over to somebody in that trade. And I was signed over to William Mentor. Yeah, you all may never have heard of him. He was around here for years and years. He was a professional cabinet maker. Yeah, cabinet maker, that's anything with something to do with wood, furniture of any kind, and always coffins. So just keep that in mind. Now, I was only apprenticed for 4 years because I was already half grown, 14 years old. So I was just apprenticed for 4 years. So when I turned 18, I was loose. But now I continued to work for Mr. Mentor for a while because he was always trying to train youngins, and I came along, and at 18 years old, I knew my trade well enough that I helped him. So he got plenty of free labor there. He didn't have to pay me anything until I turned 18. Then what he paid me, well, he fed me, and that's about it. But I was pretty good. I saved my pennies, and in 1821, 3 years later, I had met this young lady whose family had moved in here from off, and I married Elizabeth Slater. Now this is Elizabeth here, and I always stand behind her because she's made me half of what I am. Now, we had, as I alluded a few minutes ago, 9 children. They all didn't live to be grown, but those that didn't are buried right along here. Now, that's one of our daughters. I'm in the middle. Here's my wife. We've got children here. So, there were stones there once upon a time, but, time takes a toll on lots of things. So, we keep that in mind. Now, I practiced my trade all those years and raised my children, and I'm very proud of my children. I only had 2 boys that lived to be grown, and I do want to mention both of them for just a minute because, my father wouldn't want to do that. Our oldest boy that lived was Joseph. Now, Joseph left here when he was quite young because we were able, through a good friend in Cumberland County, to get him an appointment to West Point Military Academy. He was only one of 2 in those early years in this neighborhood that got an appointment. And he went in and graduated with the class of 1842. Now, you all haven't been around that long to remember any of those fellas, but there were quite a few famous men came out of that class, including, and I'll mention whether you like him or not, he was very well known, William Tecumseh Sherman. We know what he did. We won't talk about that today. I'll save that for another resurrection. But the class of 42 came out, and within 4 years we were at war in Mexico, Mexican-American War, and my Joseph was a second lieutenant. That's what you come out with, and in the regular army, and so he was sent down to Texas first, and was on the staff of Zachary Taylor, and later he was shipped off to Mexico City, where he was in the force with General Winfield Scott. You people know your history. You know there were some pretty big heavy hitters right there, or they will be. And but he did a good job. Pleased a lot of people, I guess. He was a smart boy, and came on back and did various other things. But in 1855, they sent him to California. Of course, now that's a brand new territory and state out there, and all that gold rolling out, and there were always problems. So he was sent to California, and pretty much, you may as well say, he spent the rest of his life in that neighborhood out there, because he went out and dealt with the natives. He dealt with the people who lived there, the people who were coming in. You name it, he was in on it somehow or other. Now, I don't think he always loved it, but he did it just the same. When the Civil War came along, 1861, he found himself back in Washington, D.C. for a short while. But then they sent him back to the West Coast because there was need for soldiers out there, and the regular army was active in protecting that part of the empire. And in 1867, the United States government spent $3 million on Stewart Spaulding, Alaska. A pretty dang good bargain, if you ask me. And he was sent to what became Sitka, Alaska, to keep the peace, because there was always the threat of invasion in those islands all up in that neighborhood. So he held his own, stayed there for several years, but retired back to California in the 1870s and lived there right on up to 1904 when he was laid to rest out there. And good boy, and I was proud of him. But now my son William stayed right here. He's buried up there next to that big Azure warehouse, that you passed. He and his sisters are buried up there because there wasn't room here, believe it or not. And William was in the politics and did lots of things. He was county attorney about 5 different times. Somebody quit or died, and they appoint him. He fill out a term, and then he was elected a time or two. Served in the Civil War in the Union Army. When Governor Bramlett from Columbia was in Frankfort, he brought him to Frankfort, and William was the adjutant of something. I can't remember exactly. But he had a pretty high-ranking job with money up in Frankfort. Never did quite understand what he did. And he served through Bramlett's term and came back to Columbia and practiced law, which is where he was destined to be, because they said he had a golden tongue. He could argue with anybody, and even if he was wrong and you were right, you still didn't know it. He was a whippersnapper, I'd say. But my daughters, I had 3 daughters who were school teachers and taught hundreds, maybe thousands of kids around here. In particular, one buried up next to William, Miss Sally, as she was known to everybody in this county and other counties too. She was outstanding, and she taught at the old M&F High School. She taught at the Columbia Grade School when it was new. She did it all. Well, that's the end of me, of course. I didn't say this at the beginning because it hadn't happened yet. But I lie right here. I passed away from congestive fever in September 1852. I wasn't very old, really, if you add up my numbers. But I died in September 25th, 1952. You can count on your fingers how many days ago that was from a whole 170 years. And I'll tell you what, I'm tickled to death y'all came by. But it's going to get dark after a while, and I've got to go back to bed. I go to bed with the chicken. Thank you. Y'all come again sometime. When you get bored around here.